don't want anything to do from a DFS standpoint anyway with Robbie Anderson. I think the Bills defense is legit. And I really think that they are going to give Adam Gase old crazy eyes in the Jets. I think that they're really going to give them fits this particular week. And I forgot to mention a couple guys that I really like. It would be curious to see kind of what your take is. I know Mike Evans is going to be pretty popular this week, and also Chris Godwin. I think that Bucks Niners game is a great game to target. But kind of on a maybe contrarian side, in opposition to the Cardinals is the Lions and Marvin Jones. A lot of people are talking about how good of a play Kenny Golladay is this week. And I think a lot of people are kind of just glossing over Marvin Jones. Interested to see kind of on a sneaky scale. I know I love the Hollywood Higgins play. What do you think about Marvin Jones this week?
I do like Marvin Jones. He's a guy who in season long on a number of teams, I kind of ended up with him by default. He was basically the best guy available.
Right.
And admittedly at that time, I was a little disappointed. I was like, I really wish I had someone better. And he was kind of sitting on my bench. I have since bumped him up into my starting lineup on my season long because I think that he's in a great spot. Arizona is going to force Detroit to play up in pace by default. And their defense has so many holes in it that I think, Jones, I'm not expecting him to get 12 targets and 11 receptions, but, I think for where you drafted him, that he can certainly exceed his value and help your team. I think as far as from a daily fantasy standpoint, he is a great lower owned option that if you wanted to pair him up, even, with Matthew Stafford against this defense on DraftKings, he's $4,800. I mean, there are a bunch of sub 5K guys that could certainly help you win a tournament, and Marvin Jones is one of those dudes.
Yeah, it's we want to hit on the right ones this week, my friend. That is for sure. And moving along to the tight end position, very, very interesting on how we're going to play that this week. I think if you're playing DraftKings, Hunter Henry is definitely going to be the chalk with that low price tag against the Colts. But any guys that you might have some higher expectations than what we're talking here for expectations in week one? Are you a guy that's typically going to pay up in DFS for the stud tight ends or punt, or, what's kind of your strategy there? And are there any guys that you are starting maybe down on that fringy tight end 10 through tight end 12 range? I don't know, like your Delaney Walker types. Any guys that you're fond of for the opening week?
Well, for season long, I did the same thing for tight end that I did with quarterback, and that is I waited because basically it was, the usual suspects at the top: Travis Kelce, at 1A, George Kittle at maybe 1B or 2, and then Zach Ertz came after that. And I wasn't willing to pick up those guys that early. So I ended up with a reasonable amount of Delaney Walker. I had some Greg Olsen, guys like that who I actually was lucky enough to get some Evan Ingram, guys that kind of fell along the wayside that have proven themselves in the past and are in situations that you wouldn't be surprised to see them do well. Delaney Walker is a guy that is someone that might fall along the wayside who high volume guy. I think he's had 60 plus receptions for the last 2 years, got injured and is kind of out of sight, out of mind. I think same thing with Greg Olsen, older, guy who injured his foot and has been out of commission for a large part of 2 seasons, but is healthy. And he's proven that he's one of Cam Newton's favorite targets. And like I said before, I'm high on this Carolina offense. And by default, Greg Olsen is part of that. I think sneaky guys that, if you're just kind of completely punting the position, whether it be season long or daily, a guy like Jack Doyle, when Jacoby Brissett started for the Colts in 2017, Jack Doyle had the highest target share of any receiver on the team. So he's going to be looking Jack Doyle's way a lot. So I certainly like him. And, I think as far as cheap cash game guys go, that's what I usually do is in my cash games is I go cheap. I think I'm just going to stick with Hunter Henry. He's a guy who is going to be a red zone. I could surprisingly go back and forth. No Antonio Gates to break his stride, so I do like Hunter Henry this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the price tag for Hunter Henry is kind of one that you really can't ignore when you're talking about all those things that we look for in a tight end. The red zone potential is enormous. He's priced down there below Vance McDonald and Eric Ebron. And speaking of Colts tight ends, loved the Jack Doyle take. Of course, Brissett, I mean, I know this Colts team is different than it was a couple years ago, but this offensive line is very, very good. We have a healthy Eric Ebron and Jack Doyle, and Brissett was looking Doyle's way quite a bit those 20 or throughout the 2017 season there. So wouldn't be surprised to see if he kind of resorts back to some of that. So I love that call. Another guy that I'm looking at here in the Monday night game. Most people that drafted Jared Cook are going to have to start him. But if you are playing either the Thursday through Monday slate, or you have primetime games included, definitely wouldn't mind rolling out Jared Cook as well. One guy that I wouldn't mind playing for cheap, not to be a Lions homer or anything, but TJ Hawkinson, I could definitely see him scoring a touchdown this week. And for almost a minimum price on most DFS sites, I think if that happens, I mean, you're really going to be pleased with some of the value that he's going to return this week. It would be nice as a Lions fan personally, and the Lions super fan on here on Next Fan Up. It would be nice to see our first round pick get incorporated into the offense early. One guy that I'm going to kind of steer clear of though in week one, Thad, and only reason I want to do that is to just maybe take kind of a wait and see approach, if you will. Kind of like the opposite of Tyler Eifert. Like, if you have Tyler Eifert, I think you have to kind of, play him before you can't anymore because we're so used to not having him. But I definitely think that you have to kind of roll Tyler Eifert out there. But a guy that I'm a little bit leery on using this week, is Mark Andrews, because of some of the preseason usage, because of that low point total here in week one. This game could be kind of a slog with a lot of running. And, it could be where, maybe Miami gets out to a lead. And I don't know, Andrews was a very valuable resource for Lamar Jackson. Once Jackson kind of got into the mix there and they transitioned from Flacco. But I'm a little leery about rolling him out here in week one. And, is there anybody like that for you that you're just kind of maybe want to take a wait and see approach at tight end to see what we have there first?
I'm definitely taking the wait and see when it comes to Mark Andrews for the reasons that you explained. I think at a certain point, these guys are not going to even need to, put their foot on the pedal when it comes to scoring. So I think that he's going to be probably the odd man out. And kind of speaking of odd men out, David Njoku, I can't be high on everyone in the Cleveland offense. And if I already like, Odell Beckham and Rashard Higgins, I think David Njoku is the guy who doesn't make the cut for me. Not that he's not athletic, and he could certainly be the guy. It's just, you kind of have to draw the line somewhere. And I think for me, of all, with the exception of guys like Jordan Reed, who I think is still in the concussion protocol, guys like that I'm obviously not going to play. I think I'm going to have to take a wait and see approach when it comes to Njoku.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier when I asked about the Cleveland receiving situation. So you just basically kind of came full circle on that question and, really kind of my thoughts and my sentiments exactly. So really like that. Now, Thad, I think we've had some pretty good listeners here. So we do have just a couple minutes where I think we can throw maybe our favorite stack or like a sneaky stack at them here. We're going to skip over the defense talk. I think we can start talking more about who we think defenses really are when we come like week 4, 5, 6 in that area. And they start to kind of show their identities, if you will. So we'll skip over the defensive talk and get into a couple stacks here. I already mentioned I really like that Tampa and San Fran game, but I do think that game is going to be kind of chalky. So you've already heard me be a homer. I've already accused myself of being a homer. So I'm just going to say the Lions stack, not necessarily Matt Stafford, but if you think that the Marvin Jones or TJ Hawkinson play, you could maybe play those guys together with Stafford if you wish. If you wanted to get really sneaky there, and you do think that this is going to be kind of a lopsided game where the Lions go to the desert and spoil Kyler Murray's debut. Anybody you're looking at though in particular as far as stacking in tournaments this week, Thad?
I think what I'm going to do, first of all, I do like that Detroit Lions stack. I think Matthew Stafford kind of got a bum rap last season because, he lost some of his assets as the season went on. So, it's kind of hard to have multiple 300-yard passing games when you don't have a lot of guys to throw to. So I think if
or all your bones in your back.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Exactly. So if there was a game that I would be high on Detroit, it would be this one. So I certainly agree with that. I think the Carolina game, I'm really, like I said before, high on that Carolina team. I think the Cam Newton, DJ Moore, since I think he'll be a lower owned commodity as compared to Curtis Samuel. I like him, and you can even throw Christian McCaffrey in there. A lot of times you don't want to roster your quarterback and your running back, but in this situation, when you have a guy that is so heavily targeted in the passing game and receives such a high volume, then you can certainly do that. So I do like Carolina. I think from a cheap standpoint, the Jacoby Brissett, Jack Doyle combination. These guys are super dirt cheap. I mean, you can roster, if you put those two guys in your lineup, you can play anybody else that you want. I mean, you'll have more money than you know what to do with. So, again, in a game that I think could be a sneaky shootout, the Chargers took a hit on defense with some injuries, some recent injuries. So I don't think that, this is going to be a low scoring affair. So certainly like that as a stack. I think I'm trying to see if there are any stacks that are not obvious. I think the San Francisco Tampa Bay game will be a heavily targeted game, but there are ways that you can kind of work around the heavily owned guys. Of that game, I think Jameis Winston will be the higher owned quarterback. So go with Jimmy Garoppolo. I think Greg Kittle will be the highest owned tight end from that game. So go with OJ Howard. I think the situation with Tevin Coleman and Matt Breida, like we talked about earlier in the podcast, a little confusing. So, go with one of those guys and hope that he gets the Lions' share. So there are multiple ways to kind of go about it. But I think those are the teams that I'm looking for this Sunday.
Well, you pretty much kind of answered my last question, which was, what's a team that, we don't think that there's always that one game, Thad, every year in week 1 where team A is the huge favorite and team B comes out and just bloodies their mouth
Yep.
and runs over that team.